Pandemic preparedness and proximity to rainforests. One bias against pandemic preparedness involves geography. Proximity to tropical rainforests is directly proportional to psychological preparedness for contagious diseases like COVID-19. Societies located near tropical rainforests have a history of pandemics because of the abundance of both animal species and the types of diseases in those animals. Tropical rainforests are thus swarming with contagious pathogens like SARS-CoV-2. Tropical regions tend to be poor and have disorganized governments which do not, and cannot, respond well to epidemics. In other words, proximity to tropical rainforests is inversely proportional to the material and organizational capacity to respond to the threat. Therefore, although societies located in the tropics may be more familiar with contagion, they lack the resources and organization to tackle it when it emerges. Non-tropical regions may be highly developed economically and politically, but they are neither familiar with nor readily comprehend the destructive power of pandemics. That is, many heavily populated societies that are far from tropical rainforests thus do not have a familiarity with the pandemics that originate there. Consequently, people who live in the cooler temperate zones of the Earth are not culturally or psychologically prepared for pandemics. Uniquely, developed regions just outside a tropical zone with rainforests are both familiar with and organizationally and materially prepared for pandemics. Only East Asia fits that description. Rainforests are found in Central America and Northern South America, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia, Southern China and South Asia. Such tropical regions tend to be impoverished. In fact, economic development is almost completely limited to areas outside of the tropics. This points out other misconceptions about the varying national response to the pandemic that are based on ideological biases. It is often said that authoritarian countries like China have an obvious advantage over democracies in responding effectively to pandemics. In reality, in the early days of the emergence of the pandemic, China had the worst response based on its lack of openness and transparency. However, there are geographic reasons why China would eventually be able to mobilize against the pandemic so effectively. While China does have tropical rainforests that make it more susceptible to pandemics, most of China is located outside the tropics and so China has a fully functioning economy and state. South Korea and Japan touch the subtropics and have fully functioning economies and governments, but their proximity to China have made them familiar with pandemics. New Zealand does not perfectly fit into this scheme. The one society that stopped taking COVID precautions after an initial brilliant response is New Zealand. Because New Zealand was so successful in driving cases of infection down to zero, precautions ceased to be observed. In fact, whenever she got the chance, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made it a point to hug people when she was on camera to show off how safe New Zealand was under her watch. Unfortunately, it is especially irresponsible for public figures to flaunt the violation of precautionary practices during a pandemic, even in uninfected regions. The obvious but often unrecognized characteristic of pandemics is an exponential rate of increase in the number of people infected. That is, the infection rate takes off like a rocket once the pathogen gets a foothold. Hence, personal precautions must always be maintained during the course of a pandemic, even when the pathogen has been eliminated locally. New Zealanders might not understand this instinctively and habitually because they have little history of human pandemics. However, New Zealanders do have a history of livestock contagions like hoof and mouth disease because their economy was once based almost entirely on farming. A couple of generations ago, New Zealand equals sheep. This is why New Zealand was able to mobilize so quickly in the face of the coronavirus threat. Based on agricultural practices, the New Zealand state knew the proper procedures needed to drive down and keep down infections. But unlike Japan, New Zealanders have no history of maintaining safe practices among humans. New Zealanders did not know how to persist with personal precautions.